Welcome to A Pleasure of Being. I'm Vanessa, your host, and today's episode is very special because it's the first one in English and also is the one that we open the microphones for people who are making a really good difference here in the world, in the business area, in the art and the community, helping people. And I couldn't think about a better person than Daniel Ramírez. Welcome to the Pleasure of Being.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I think it's so exciting and honoring to be here to be the first podcast in English with you and the amazing work that you're doing. I think it's constantly being able to create awareness for everybody and the people that are listening to you and the impact that you're creating for them is absolutely powerful. So I just truly honored to be on.
Thank you so much. Daniel Ramirez is one of the owners of the well known Mexican restaurant in Colorado. And I've had the privilege to work with you, and I deeply admire you. So I'm so happy that you are here in the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for being part of the team with us as well.
Thank you so much. And let's dive in. So let's start with your roots, Daniel.
Yeah.
Where do your family come from and how do they start this big dream?
Yeah. So mom and dad are from Jerez, Zacatecas, Mexico. My mom grew up in a family of 8. My father grew up in a family of 15. And they didn't know anything about the restaurant industry, right? They migrated over from Mexico to the United States, and when they did, they had me, my brother, and I, and they started working in the restaurant industry, right? And my dad started as a dishwasher. From a dishwasher, he went to a server, and from a server, he started to go into management. And from management, he started to realize, what, I want to be able to open up my restaurant one day. So what he ended up doing is he got connected with one of his sisters, one of his 15 siblings, and they opened up their first Mexican restaurant off 72nd and Pecos called Tia Maria Mexican Restaurant. And Tia Maria was there for many, many years. It had a great track record. But, before that, my father did some really great things with my Tia Maria. Then that's really formulated the recipes. My mother helped a lot with the recipes. She was working in the kitchen at the time. My brother and I were just kids running around really trying to create havoc and trying to get out of people's way. We were always in the kitchen playing with dough or peeling shrimp, peeling potatoes. We were really inside the restaurant. That's where we ate there, slept there, had our birthday parties there. So when my father decided to break off and say, look, I want to do my own thing, he actually went to a place downtown off 18th and Arapahoe. And in 18th and Arapahoe, there was this restaurant called Arapahoe Junction. It was a friend of my Tia Maria and my father's. We called him Pelon. That was his name, but his real name was Paul. And Paul actually ended up winning the lottery, which was crazy. He won the lottery and he went up to my father and he said, look, Jose, if you want to just play the cam charger, just go ahead. You can just sell some of my food. Let's keep this restaurant running. So to an extent, my father got lucky the same way Paul got lucky as well with winning the lottery. And my father started to run this restaurant called Arapahoe Junction, selling, what Los Dos Potrillos food is today, just that his dream of that. So he ended up saving enough money to then finally opening up the original location in 2002. And when we opened that original location in 2002, we were in the restaurant, always, I would say Monday through Sunday, maybe getting off around 6:00 on a Sunday because my mom had to work and we didn't have anybody take care of us. So Luis and I were always inside the restaurant. And when we opened that business, because we only had $5.18 left in our bank account. And when we did that, it was, everybody was in there, all hands on deck. I mean, at 10 years old, I was helping white tables. As my brother was 14 years old, he was trying to help with, sitting people down. It was a true, unique, what a family business was. Everyone helping and trying to help as much as possible. And then from there, we, every week, instead of my father saying, look, we're getting any paycheck, there's no paychecks at the beginning at all. He started to, anything that he got, he would invest it back into the business, invest it back into the people. And it's the same methodology we still do today. And we constantly keep investing it back into the business. The lights weren't as nice when we first opened. So they upgraded the lights, or the walls weren't as nice. So he upgraded the walls, right? Then the paintings were nice. So he upgraded the paintings, and little by little, we just started upgrading the restaurant. And then we went from 3,200 square feet to 4,900 square feet and to what it is today. And it still stayed at 4,900 square feet. And then in 2008, we opened our second location. off C470 in Kipling. And in 2016 is when we opened up our third location. And that's when I came back into our family business after going to college, coming back. And then in 2018, we opened Parker, which was the first Mexican restaurant, Mexican brewery. And then we went to Castle Rock and then to Denver. So it's been a while. It's been a wild ride for these, since 2002.
Wow, that's very interesting, to be honest. It's not easy work, absolutely not. What did your family teach you about resilience and be like supporting your dreams?
Mom and dad didn't really understand what, dreams were because their one dream was one door, right? It's you go through that door and you don't look back. And their biggest thing was always, son, try it. If you fail, you're young enough to continue succeeding. And that was their whole belief system. And I think it's sometimes harder for people like me and other people that might be in my shoes because, we have maybe two or three different doors, right? And versus my mom and dad, I like to say it was easier for them because even if they were mad at each other, even if they had a bad day, they still showed up to work and said, we got to get through. We got to get done. If we got to get done, we got to continue persevering in what we call for our kids, for our family, for ourselves. And for me, my mom and dad has always coached and tried to develop me and say, try it. And if you fail, you just keep moving and moving and growing because, the sky is the limit and anything is possible. Right. And of course, anything is possible. But sometimes it's harder to say, look, there's so many doors. It's hard to just say, look, just be committed to this, focus on this, and focus on whatever that is as a process, because it doesn't matter about the outcome, because my mom and dad never thought we would get to 6 restaurants. They never thought that I would help them get to where we are today, because it was never about the outcome, and it's still never about the outcome. It's always about the process and focusing on, how do we continue to create a better culture for our people with us? How do we continue to create a better community around us? And how do we continue creating traditions for the people that come inside our restaurants? That's what it's about. It's not about the outcome of, hey, let's get 100 restaurants. It's about the process that gets us to 100 restaurants.
Well, absolutely. The process matters in our lives. And I want to ask you, what is the hardest thing to handle a business? And you're one of the business owners. So, what is the challenging behind that?
I think one of the challenging parts when it comes to dealing with any business, right? There's 4 buckets that I believe in life: business, community, family, and self. And the hardest thing is ourselves personally, because if we can't handle ourselves and if we don't understand ourselves, we're not going to be able to understand how to run a business, how to run our family, how to run our community, and how to run and how to run ourselves, most importantly. It ends up becoming confusing to say, look, I want to open up all these great restaurants and I want to create so much value for the community. But if you're not focusing on yourself and focusing what you need, you can't give to others what you don't give to yourself. So when I think what the hardest thing is when it comes to business is really focusing on yourself first. Because if you're not focusing on yourself, how are you going to be able to give that to every person that you connect with?
Wow. I think that's important because sometimes we are in the dream or the American dream and we forget ourselves. What does it mean to be happy and freedom, right? Mm, Daniel, another question. What does being Latino mean to you as a business owner?
Being Latino to me is something to be, super grateful for, and understanding the roots that I've come from, right? The belief system, the standard that my mom and dad have, created in my mind who I am, and to be 100% Mexicano, right? Even though I'm not from 100% Mexico, but both my parents are Mexicanos. And to understand, being Latino is I have the ability to connect with Latinos. I have the ability to connect with, any race, and it doesn't matter, right? I think for me, being Latino makes me proud to be. I come from immigrant families and their story, and it continues to create more stories. So I'm proud to be a Latino. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud to be, continue creating value for anybody, whether they're Latino, they're American, or anybody else, whatever race they are coming from. Is I feel like we have the ability, because we've seen it from a different perspective, is we have the ability to see and meet other people where they're at from their point of view, because it's not one-stop shop. It's, we grew up in a different way, but we also have the ability to learn from other people, and they get to learn from us at the same time. So it's constant learning, to say the least. So I think I'm more proud of the fact that we can continue to learn from all of us, because we all come from different belief systems. It's not just something that's common.
Mhm. Many of our listeners are immigrants. So, what advice would you give them to them? They are dreaming about having a restaurant or a business,
Yeah.
overcoming challenges. So,
Yep.
what's your advice for them?
My biggest advice when it comes to when it comes to dreams and aspirations, right? A lot of us don't ever think about what does the bigger picture look like. We talk to say, "Okay, yeah, hopefully God gives us another day to live." And it's great. It's good to talk. It's good to think that way. And it's good to have faith. But I think it's also important to say, what is it that you truly want, right? And I like to break up at least my life into quarters. Quarter one is 0 to 20 years old. Quarter two is 20 to 40 years old. Quarter three is 60 years old. And quarter four is 60, and I said to 95 years old. And none of us ever expected to be where we are today, right? And that's a huge accomplishment. But being able to write down what you've accomplished so far within your first quarter, second quarter, whatever quarter you are, it's so important to reflect on you're on the right path. And maybe if you're not on the right path, well, how do I fix the right path to get to where I want to go? So if you want to open up 4 restaurants or be a restaurant owner, what quarter of your life do you want that to happen? And if it's in your second quarter or your third quarter, what are you doing today to get closer to that, right? Who are you connecting with? What resources are you using? And what resources that you might not know, and who can you ask to help you find those resources to get you closer to that dream? And it doesn't have to be here. It can be back to where your country is from. It could be anywhere in the world, to say the least. It could be the dream is it's so broad sometimes, and that's what sometimes makes it a little scary for us. But it's helping narrowing it down and saying, look, this is what I want for my first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter of my life. You tend to be a little bit more hyper focused versus having so many doors open. Just choose one door, go through that, and focus on that process.
Awesome. That reminds me our last meeting at Los Dos Potrillos in
Yeah.
Denver. You talked about it, and it's been a lot of meetings with you, and I can see you care about your employees.
Yes.
There are so many restaurants that they don't. It's more about how much you sell,
Right.
but you care about the core, and the core is the employees.
100%.
Why is that so important for you?
Yep. Because it's not about me. It's about the people that are with us. Because if I make it about me, then it's just selfish. Because I've learned so much, and it's about me teaching the things that I've learned to all the people that are with us and part of our team. Because one day, if they want to continue being part of Los Dos, amazing. They continue growing in the ranks. That's amazing. But one day they'd say, you know what? I want to go back to school. You know what? Maybe Los Dos isn't for me. But it's the same fundamental thing that I've learned that's helped me in my family dynamics, and me how hard it's been in our family dynamics of communicating with each other and being able to respect each other. It's all the same thing when being a part of community. It's like whatever you're learning at Los Dos, you have the ability to implement it in every aspect of your life, whether it's a different job, whether it's part of your family, whether it's in your business community, family, yourself. It's the same fundamental process, because it's not about Los Dos. It's the bigger picture for where everybody wants to go and where they want to be in the next 10 to 15, 20, 30, 60 years. It's about them. It's not about me. It's whatever thing that I can do to create value in their life, because there's restaurants everywhere. You can work at a restaurant down the street from us, but it's what you're working at Los Dos is the value that I get to be able to bring back. It's not about the business. It's about the fundamental things that I can teach you for the rest of your life. The things that our parents didn't teach us, right? The things that we didn't learn at school. It's the things that are bigger and so much better than the things that we want to learn. And we never knew the answers, but we see it on YouTube or we see it on Instagram. It's like, no, I have a lot of these tools. I have a lot of these things that I can teach you. Now this is the things that I implement in my life. I want to be able to teach everybody now inside the restaurant.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really appreciate it. There is so much wisdom in what you're saying. And I'm wondering what has been those situations for you that is hard. You think about giving up. You thought about how can I overcome this situation. Would you like to share some of the experiences in your life?
Yeah, I think when it comes to giving up, right? I think all of us, it's like understanding, well, what are we giving up on, right? I think a lot of times, like even when it comes to relationships, right? Like my wife and I, it becomes difficult because that relationships gets a little long, to say the least, right? And a lot of times you want to give up on the relationship, but it's also understanding. And I like to say, how do we renew our contract, right? It's about renewing contracts over and over with yourself and with the person that you're renewing a contract with. It could be a vendor, it could be a relationship, it could be a friendship, it could be a contract with yourself. And what does that mean? Because failure can mean, look, I'm done. That's failure is the fact that sometimes you need to fail because sometimes we were just so blinded, and our ego was so large enough to say, look, I'm not thinking about anybody else but myself. But it's bringing it down, being grounded and saying, okay, what contract do I have to renew? For example, like, again, my wife and I, we've been dating, we dated for about a year and a half, and then we've been married for almost 10 years. But if you look at the timeline, what I've been through is we dated, and then I had to go through a process of heartaches in my family through personal issues with my brother and my mom and dad, and that dynamic and how crazy that was. And that's when I got into the family business, and Mallory was still a part of that because she was seeing me be frustrated. And, from there, we went into opening a new restaurant. From there, it went to being hard. It was extremely hard to get pregnant. So that put a lot of stress on the family, myself and her. And then it went into COVID. And then it went into me having cancer. And then it went into me, trying to realign everything up. And that's about 7 years of constraints or things that's happened in our life. And the point of failure, you start thinking, is like, well, where are we? Where's our relationship now? Right. And whether it's a friendship, a community, or whatever it is, because how much I've grown since the moment we started dating and how much she's grown since the moment we started dating are completely very large. We've grown in so many different ways. So that's why it's so important to say, look, this is who you were 7 years ago. You might not like the same things that I like anymore. I might like the same things that I used to like, but where are we and how do we recreate this relationship? Right. And it's the same thing when it comes to business, right? It's like, hey, you've grown, from last year to this year. Like, where do you want to go now? How do we continue developing you? And how do we continue developing our relationship to get to where we want to go next? I'm a true believer that it's 50% and 50% of a relationship. I'm here to give 50%, my best 50%. But I can't give 100%, because if I give 100% of the relationship, then it's like, well, what's the other person going to be left to have, right? It's my 50%, their 50%. So we're right there to make 100% and make it, fulfilling, to say. Does that make sense?
Awesome. You said something about getting cancer.
Yep.
So would you like to share
Sure.
about that?
Yeah, my cancer journey, I'm a stage 2 testicular cancer survivor. I had no idea that I even had cancer until my son stepped in, my crotch area. And then that I'm like, wait, something is wrong. So I went to the doctor, got checked out. And then they had me waited for a couple weeks. And it's just to kind of, that's where fear, and I like to say fear is false evidence appearing real, started to come in, because I started creating so many stories in my mind. And when the doctor called and was like, hey, yeah, it's cancer, like, we need to see you, then it's like, okay, reality started to set in. It's like, well, what did I do incorrectly? What was wrong? I really started shaming myself, and it was extremely difficult for my family, me, my 1-year-old at the time. I say, when I had cancer, it felt like everyone had cancer, because everyone was still having that same feeling. So I had to go have my surgery. And then after I had my surgery, I went and did a blood work for about a month to see if my tumor markers would start to decline. And they started to decline, but then they started to naturally climb up again. And that was an indicator that something was still in my system, even though we thought we caught it in time, which we did. We were very, very thankful for that. But there was still something circulating in my bloodstream. It's somewhere in there. So that ended up causing me to have 3 rounds of chemotherapy. So I had to take 3 rounds of chemotherapy. It's bleomycin etoposide. So it's called BEP. And it was about 3 months of that. So it would be, the first week would be a full week, Monday through Friday. It would be like if I was on a job. Like, I would go in at 8 o'clock in the morning, check in, and then I wouldn't get out till 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just sitting in a chair and just having chemo. And those were 2 bags. And then I would do that Monday through Friday. And then the weekend would rest. And then on Monday, I would have 1 bag. And then I would have the rest of the week to lay low. Then I would come back that 3rd week, and then I would have 1 bag again, and then rest of the week to lay low. But then again, I would go back into Hell Week, which is the start of a new cycle, Monday through Friday, and so on and so forth. So I had to do 3 cycles of that. And, when I went in, it was the craziest thing. 2 things. It was crazy to think about. So where I got my cancer treatment, it was the same hospital that my son was born. And I still remember I was doing payroll when my son was born. It was a Thursday, and Mallory was upstairs. The baby was, like, of course, in the hands care, and I was downstairs, and I was walking by this cancer center that's in the hospital. I'm like, if I ever get cancer, I'm going to go right here. Like, I said that naturally. It was really like, I was like, ooh, why did I say that? Let's have him and take with me, right? Because it was a nice looking cancer center. And then of course, then they say, oh, like fast forward, years later, I'm like, well, I had cancer. So I ended up going to that same hospital, UC Health. And I still remember walking in, I told my mom and dad and my wife, I said, look, I'm walking in these doors and when I'm done, I'm going to walk home. And on my last treatment, completely bald, everything. And my last day, I rang the bell and I walked home. I walked 3.5 miles after my last treatment.
Wow.
I was like, if I'm walking in here, I'm gonna walk out, and I'm not gonna turn back, and I'm just gonna focus on what the biggest process. The mission and the vision was just to survive, and the vision was to be clear after that, and then my expectation was to walk home, and I accomplished that.
What an story.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, how did you do it with your family, with the restaurant, the
Yep.
company that you
Yep.
have? How did you manage that while you were in the treatment?
Yeah. So during that time, there was not much going on. We didn't we really weren't looking for expansion at the time. Like it was just, let's just focus on the fundamentals and what we're currently working on. At the time, we only had 4 restaurants, Parker, so Centennial Littleton, Hines Ranch, and Parker. And it was, there wasn't much going on, right? But I would still, I'm part of the restaurant association, and I was still hopping on the calls when I was in the chemo chair and for the Colorado Restaurant Association board meetings. And every Thursday, it was still my responsibility at the time to submit payroll. So I was submitting payroll from my chemo chair or being done from chemo and going to the restaurant and submitting payroll every Thursday. And that was still my objective. I still stayed in the process. I think the hardest thing was, my wife and I and Danny and how difficult it was because my son didn't understand and conceptualize when I'm laying on the couch completely zonked and tired. He just wanted to play with me, but I just wanted to rest. And that was more difficult to kind of conceptualize with such at the 1 year old at the time. And
Oh,
and the business, we kept moving. My brother was a part of it still, my dad was still a part of it, my mom. So they really took a lot of the weight, and a couple people in the corporate office like Caesar Gregoria at the time. And that was really it. And but everything else, I think the harder thing was the family aspect. The business kept moving, but I still had to focus on what I needed to focus on, still do payroll and all the little things. I didn't go inside and work in the restaurant because, they wanted me to be away as much as possible. But when I got out, I had to finish what I needed to finish.
what a commitment you have with your family, with the business, that even with the cancer, you didn't give up. You
Right.
didn't stop. You were like, even in this situation, I'm going to continue working. So
Right.
that's very admiring. And how important is for you mental health and have the balance with our emotions?
Yeah. I think when it comes to mental health, it's something that we don't talk enough about. I think it's something that we need to talk about it more, especially in our belief system como Latinos. I say there's 3 things that nuestro sistema de crecimiento told us, right? Is don't talk about your feelings, don't talk about your finances, and don't talk about yourself, right? It's like, you know, it's relationship problems, self problems, or finance problems. Nunca le digas a nadie eso. Like always keep it to yourself. And that was, I think, un sistema de crecimiento, a system that we were brought up from to never talk about that. And I'm such an advocate to say, look, it's okay to talk about your feelings because this thought or feeling is not felt alone, right? If you're feeling it, somebody else is probably feeling it. And, if you're not letting your emotions be felt, then something is incorrect because your emotions, that's all your emotions want to be. They just want to be felt. And I always like to correlate it back to kids. Like if you think of a little child, and if they need something, they use their emotions because they don't know how to use their words. Their words are their emotions, and we've learned how to suppress our emotions, so we don't know how. And now then you start talking about, well, why is he so quiet, or why is she so quiet? It's like, well, because we've learned to be quiet, right? We've learned not to show our emotions, and we should be doing the opposite. What we've done is being able to speak our emotions, speak how we're truly feeling, and understand it's, look, this feeling that I'm feeling, you've probably felt. And we just, we can't pretend that you're better than me and I'm better than you, is because we both have the same feeling. So when it comes to, mental health and being able to talk about mental health, it's so important to me to advocate for feelings, because mental health is being able to feel your feelings. And I genuinely believe that mental health is also a opportunity for us to connect with relationship, especially if we can have all the relationships in the world, but if we're truly not getting getting deeper to actually have genuine relationship and connection, then what kind of relationship do we have? It's like everything else, because I have issues. The person across the street has issues. The person that I just met has issues, and they're probably all the same issues. And it's a business issue, a self issue, a family issue, a community issue. They're all the same issues, but we should be able to be more open in talking about it.
Mhm. What tools do you teach to your kids? How old are they, and
Yeah.
how do you apply it to the business also?
Yeah. So my son is 5, he'll be 6, and I have a 2-year-old. She'll be 2 in September. So we take the model, mom and dad, right? Mom and dad's model was great. It was a great model. I turned out to be a good kid. It was fine. But I always tell everybody, I said, it doesn't matter how good of a parent you think you're doing, you got to just take a break, because take a step back and understand that everything that you think you're doing correctly, we're still doing something incorrectly, right? It's not 100% perfect, and it's never going to be 100% perfect. And with mom and dad, their whole methodology was, we would ask, they would say, no hagas eso, don't do that. And I would say, ¿por qué no? And it's like, why not? And they would say, porque te dije. It's like, well, because I said so. It's like, well, why? And then it's like, no me respondes, don't talk back to me. It's like, well, why? It's because they probably didn't know why. They didn't have the words to tell you why not to do that. And that's what created so much confusion. It's like, well, no hagas eso. It's like, why? Porque te dije. It's like, why? ¿Por qué no? It's because they don't know the answer. I think of myself, it's like, as a parent, we like to villainize our parents and victimize ourselves a lot. But I'm like, my parents had no idea how to be a parent. I had no idea how to be a parent. I'm still focusing on how to be a parent. I'm still focusing how to be a business leader. I'm still focusing and trying to figure out how to be the best version of myself. And that's just the process of it, and being vulnerable enough to admit that we're still a work in progress in that. And, when it comes to really setting a structure at home, and the thing that I've learned and realized is really creating a standard and really creating core values. My son, about 2.5 years ago, when he started to understand words and understand feelings a little bit better, he would throw these tantrums and not understand and how to communicate correctly. And, we started really talking about respect, and we started really to define and show him respect. So whenever he threw a tantrum or did something incorrectly, that in our world, in our mind, we thought it wasn't respect, because it's all for a personal view. We would say, buddy, is that respectful or not respectful? It's like, that's not respectful. It's like, exactly. So we're teaching him what respect is and what not respect is. It's the same thing with authenticity. A lot of the times he comes home and he's like, he starts talking all like funny or anything. And it's like, it's great. Funny is great. But then he starts to take it to another level of like, buddy, is this really you? Where are you learning that from? Right? It's okay to be, if you would be the person that you want to be, but also be your authentic self of who you want to be, right? It's like, I think you're funny, the person that you are. You don't have to try to be someone else to be more funny. Like, be the person that you are, be authentic, right? And confidence, right? We talk about a lot about confidence and how hard it is for all of us, even as adults, and the confidence we have, right? It's like, buddy, go say hi to this person, shake their hand. And like, no, it's like, come on, you got to work on confidence. Like, watch, come with me. And he's even called me out on a couple times on that, which is the best thing, right? And and it's even of like, we went out to this dinner, him and I, and it's like, I'm like, I think that's the owner of that restaurant. And he's like, Papa, why don't you go say hi to him? It's like, I will in a little bit. And it's like, he's like, Papa, have confidence. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, buddy, 100%. Right. And we've created this fun relationship and this fun way of creating it based on values, which is then based off a standard. It's not based off my own judgment, or because I don't know. And if I don't know, then I don't know. Right. It's like, Papa, why is this? Why do we do this? It's like, buddy, honestly, I don't know, but let's figure this out together. And it's the same methodology as, you cannot be one person in your business life and another person in your family life. It's incongruence. You have to be the same person that you are in business as the same person that you are in your family, your community, and yourself. So it's standards, it's values, and defining the standard and the value, and even making a mission and a vision for what your family, what you want for your family.
How can you describe yourself, Daniel? Because from this side, we see a businessman, a person who take care of his family, right? Of the employees also. But how describe yourself? How do you do your best?
How do I do my best, and how do I describe myself? I'm a coach. I'm a teacher. I don't, whatever anybody wants to label me as, right? And it's the best version that I want to be and who I want to become. And I think more of us should do that, because it's, if we put our name on ourselves, then we tend to put ourselves, I think, on a pedestal. And it's like, well, look at me, I'm the king. It's like, well, no, you're not, right? And it's like, whatever anybody wants to call me, if I'm a coach to them, if I'm a teacher to them, if I'm a mentor to them, I like to say, I'm not really a CEO. I'm just a coach. I'm just a mentor. I'm just a a person that's going to help you get to that next level. Like I was strength and conditioning coach. I was in strength and conditioning. I majored in exercise science, and I like to coach people to get them to their next level, to their goal. And that's all I love to do now. And that's really what I'm doing in my business is how do we get to our goals, but how do we get to your goals, and how do we get to your goals and everyone else's goals? Because it's all about goal setting. And, so the way people tend to look at me and however they want to look at me is their own perception. And it's the work that I'm doing and the person that I am that I do every single day is what they can consider me as, because it's about having integrity with yourself and understanding like this is the person that I am, and this is the person that I love who I am, and not just naming myself of what I need to be. It's who am I serving, and how am I serving them.
Nice. Awesome. What does the pleasure of being mean to you, Daniel?
I love what you're doing, right? And it's being able to have these great podcasts and these great talks with so many great people, and the pleasure. If you think of pleasure and you think of being, right, it's being, I think I look at it as being grounded, of being you, right? The pleasure of being yourself, the pleasure of not thinking of what anyone else thinks of you. It's about of you going out and being your authentic self. You have to be able to be your own self and being okay with being your own self and understanding that you don't need to know it all. And I think that's where the pleasure of being, it's like, well, the pleasure of being yourself, I think is so powerful, and knowing that it's a work in progress. It's we're here now, but let's do an interview like in 10 years, and wherever else we're going to be, right? It's you're meeting people where they're at, and the pleasure of being and pleasure of being together, I think is something absolutely powerful, because the next time we'll do this, it's you'll be in a completely different world, I'll be in a completely different world, but it's still being a pleasure of being together in community and being together in relationship.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you in the next time. This was from the bottom of my heart. And thank you so much
Yeah, of
for your
course.
team. Thank you for your time. See you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.